Nomkhita, morning to you. Thanks for your time. Is this really the end of the road, it seems, as far as these branches are concerned? No more options, nothing else we can do. You're going to close these branches down?
Not at all. There's always options in everything. But I think that the manner in which the story came out was how we responded to a question in Parliament. The reality is that in 2016, the SA Post Office took a decision to rationalize some of its post offices. This was based on the fact that if you went to the urban areas in particular, you would find that there could easily be 3 post offices within a 3 to 5 kilometer radius. So that, we believe, is not a viable business model in any business. That was the first thing. But I must hasten to add that this is a decision that was taken in 2016, and since then, over 50 of these post offices have actually been closed. So the remainder is going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years, none of which might even be this year, because it's based on a review that we're doing all the time internally. So I do not believe that the grant recipients should worry. They will not be affected. And this is about rationalizing. So we're not really just closing willy-nilly. We are closing one that's too close and bringing it to one within the same area, so there will always be access.
So what I'm hearing, what I'm understanding, Nomkhita, this is not a case of scaling down and selling off the assets to close it down. This is a case of not being profitable and managing resources correctly. That's why it's scaling down on some of the post office branches. That leads me to my second question. If you were to, for example, close down 2 post offices in an area and move it to a larger post office, does that third post office have the facilities to handle the influx? Because is there enough staff to manage the now amalgamated post office branches?
Staff at the post office is not an issue. We are reported to have 16,765 workers working for the post office. So on the staff side, that's really not an issue. And also what we do is, as we close post offices, we then move the staff and redeploy them in areas where they are required. So you would also find in the past that you would have a post office, but then you would have till points with no tellers at the post offices. So the issue on resources around staff is sorted in that area. But also your question is around how else are we making sure that the new, in inverted commas, post office has everything it needs. That has been taken care of as well. I also want to make the point that in the past, we tended to move away from our own buildings that were owned by the post office, and we moved into malls. And those are the post offices that we are reviewing, because in some instances, we're actually just going back into our own building, which is usually within a kilometer from the mall. So it really, the access is one of our biggest issues. We want South Africans not to worry about not being able to access the services of post offices, but also it's important to note that in South Africa, there were about 1,500 post offices throughout the country. And the closure of 130 really will not actually be that much, especially because we're focusing more on the urban areas. We are not touching the rural areas because, indeed, the distances there are vast.
Let's talk in the last minute or two I have with you, Nomkhita, about the post bank. Where are we on that? That seemed to be the solution to a number of issues, including the SASSA grants, including the opening up of bank accounts, etc. There were many ideas being thrown around, and I know you're dealing with various issues, including the incredible debts incurred by the post office. But where are we on the post bank this morning? What's happened?
The government has taken a decision to decouple the post bank from the post office. Remember, it was always a wholly owned subsidiary. So now the bank is going to be commercialized and looking for or applying for its own license. So that process is underway.
And then perhaps I'll make this my last question, because I think it's a relevant question to ask after you've answered the scaling down of post offices and their buildings. It's an incredible amount of money that has been incurred by the post office, 1.7 billion rand, assets exceeding 1.5 billion rand. How are you going to dig the organization out of this kind of debt?
Well, there's 3 areas that we're looking at. Firstly, we're looking for new sources of revenue. We have identified a number, and that's what we are actively going for at this point. Secondly, we believe that it's important that government supports the post office, because the post office actually, it does not run the other post offices in terms of access on a profitable basis. We know that those post offices will never make money. That is the first thing. But also, back to your question around the post bank, the post office had nurtured the post bank. It grew that asset. It put value in it. And we do expect that government would at the very least compensate us for the decoupling of the post bank from the post office.
So just in final and in closing, Nomkhita, you're telling me this morning that the SASA grants are not going to be affected by the closing down of some of the South African post office branches. Very briefly, that's what you're telling me.
100% correct. That's what I'd like to confirm.
All right. Well, then, for the moment, I thank you for your time. South African Post Office CEO Nomkhita Mona. So many issues to discuss, of course, with the Post Office, but the big one, is it going to affect the grant recipients? 100% confirmed by the CEO. The closing of some post offices not going to affect SASA grants.